Hello, Tom, and thank you so much for chatting with me. It's a huge honor having followed your work for many years. I kind of wanted to ask you a few questions because I've been such a fan over the years. I think that's something that always resonated with me about your creative output is the theatrical hand with which you present your collections. And I think I read somewhere that you tried your hand at acting. And I wonder if those two things are somehow linked or do they correlate with one another?
I mean, indirectly, I think there's probably a connection. I think the connection, not really specifically with the collections that per se, but it's more in how I like people to see the collections. And I see this in your work too. I think there's something so beautifully conceptual about taking classic ideas and just showing them in ways that people don't know what is going on. And I like them to, really have an honest and authentic reaction. I don't always expect them or want them to like what I'm doing.
There's a clear American sensibility to your work. And I wanted you to talk a little bit to me about how you strike that genius balance between creativity and commerciality, let's say.
Well, I think that is the key to survival. I mean, I think
Yeah.
what's most important for me is to be able to have something that you can actually create a business on. But then my shows, the last thing I ever think about is commerciality. I
Right.
really like it's the 20 to 30 minutes that you have to put ideas in front of people that just make the classic ideas of what keeps the business going. But that shouldn't be your only interest, because I think, especially when I see your work too, there's something so interestingly new and interesting and unique and authentic. And I love how you say that you see the American sensibility. And I think when I see your work, I see an amazing and very authentic British sensibility, which I think is really important that, that people see that, because there's such a true authenticity to that. And I think there's such a power in creating, something that is authentically yours.
Thank you so much. It's kind of like a pinch me moment that you have even seen my work. So that is,
I did my homework.
Thank you so much. Kind of wanted to ask you the questions maybe that you wouldn't really have been asked during like a typical interview. So like for me, it's super interesting as a young designer looking to you. What are the parts of the job that you don't love to do that have sort of come along with the with the with the ride?
Well, just like, as you know, I was starting your own business and starting your own collection. In a way, you have to make sure that you know what is going on with the business. And,
Right.
sometimes that's not the most fun. I mean, I do have the luxury now, 20 years in, that I have amazing people that take care of most of that for me. But, I do still want to know what's going on. The business can be tough sometimes. I mean, everybody looks back and thinks like, oh, it was like an overnight success, but it took me like 5 years to get it to stores. And the one thing that people don't realize is that I loved doing my collection, and I loved it more than anyone else. And I think that's the reason why the beginning was not so hard for me, because I knew eventually somebody would get it and somebody would, and then it happened. But it certainly
Yeah.
wasn't overnight.
I suppose that leads us to that question that is forever asked: is fashion art? I wonder what your opinion is on that question.
I think that's a question for, other people to answer. Um, I I don't feel like it's our part to answer that question. I feel like we should just do what we do and create the most beautiful, the most interesting, the most provocative ideas, and let other people kind of label it however they want to label it. But I do feel like my partner Andrew, who's the curator at the Costume Institute at the Met, has elevated fashion to a really, I think, a true artistic level in the way that he presents, fashion in his shows. So, art, I think, is purely the act of creating something and something interesting. So I do feel like we create interesting, beautiful things.
And I also don't really feel as though we need to like super define it down to being one particular thing. I think what we do encompasses a multitude of things. And why do we have to, um, pin it down to one label, I suppose? And I wanted to sort of more understand what the idea of craft and consideration of craft, what does that mean to you? And why is that so important to you and to your work?
I think it's mostly important for me because the tailor who I really learned everything in regards to tailoring from, Rocco, was an old Roman tailor, and the quality of what he did was extraordinary, especially here in America. And because I think a lot of people around the world don't really always associate American tailoring with quality.
Okay.
So for me, it was as provocative an idea as I was putting in front of people. The most important thing for me was, and sometimes I feel like the most fashionable part about what I did was how it was made. And you do come from a culture, British tailoring always has been, at the highest level, and so people always associate British tailoring with the highest level. So it was important for me, especially coming from America and using such an American sensibility to meld the two, the quality and that American sensibility, and showing the world that this is ultimately the most important thing was how the quality of how things are made, because I think something that's beautifully made is a lot more fashionable than any type of fashion out there.
100%. Totally agree.
Because of how important tailoring is to your British culture, and coming from such a British sensibility, do you feel almost the burden sometimes that you have to live up to that quality standard?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's always a magnifying glass in a under tailoring here. I feel I didn't have a hugely practical hand in tailoring. It always scared me, to be honest, because it is so magnified here, and it's looked at in so close detail. When I first started with clothes and making fashion, I started in women's wear because I was so scared of tailoring in menswear. So that held me back for a year or two. And I think that I've really just tried to learn and to teach myself a little bit. Although I've been so lucky this last year to have contact with an incredible um, tailor, and he's really helped me to fine tune some of the skills that I feel as though I always run away from.
You're early into your collections, but you feel like you ever have a challenge finding what you want? I actually come to you, to England and Ireland and Scotland, so much more than I actually, utilize the States for most fabrics. So I would be lost if I just looked to the United States for
Okay.
everything. I wish at the beginning I loved doing as much as possible here in the US, but in the end of the day, as I started growing, I was like, you have to open up to wherever I can get that quality is where I'm gonna go. And you ever find, even this early on, that you have any challenges finding what you want?
The one thing I find really tricky to source in particular is yarn for knit. A lot of the time has to be from Europe for me, just because it's super interesting to have the conversation about how the weather here and the land and the terrain and the way that the animals, sheep, are fed and treated. Um, their sort of life is a lot more coarse and rough. So then the yarn can end up being a lot heavier and coarse and rough, which is brilliant for Harris tweed fabrics and those sorts of things. But it doesn't offer a brilliant summer wardrobe.
but I feel like it's almost seasonless in a way. I never limit. I do the scratchiest, most uncomfortable Irish knits for spring as well as for fall. So, when I look at your collection, I see so many, like, it should be seasonless, because I think the beauty in your knits is almost that true, authentic English kind of Shetland wool or Irish, cable knits. How much of fashion do you know? Like, is it something that you actually, I don't know. For me, I put my blinders on and I try to know as little as possible. And I always wonder how other people, what they want to know and what they actually know, and, what they use as references, and hopefully they use as little fashion as references as possible. But,
Yeah,
everyone.
I think that for the last like 6 or 7 years, I've been completely obsessed with fashion, and I've looked at every collection, zoomed in on every detail shot, and read every review. But over the last year, now starting my own brand, I actually find it really unhelpful, like super. I just try not to now, because I don't know, it can be so difficult sometimes when you have this whole idea for something and then you just flicking through a thing. It's like, oh, this person today has just done that. And I'm like, oh, I wish I hadn't seen that, because it's sort of now dissuading me from doing what I want to do. So I'm not really like a consumer of fashion as of the last 12 months, which is kind of a shame, because I do kind of miss it, but I think it's for the best. I never feel great when I look through fashion anymore. I always just compare it to myself now. Um,
I think it makes it so much easier when you don't know anything that's going on.
yeah, I think I was like most of the way through my last collection, and I flicked through Vogue when I was on a lunchtime, I think, and I just felt so dreadful after flicking through it. I was like, oh God. I was like, well, I don't know why I've just flicked through this and now feeling like I question everything I'm doing.
What other references, or what other things do you look at?
I look at films quite often. So, like those Merchant Ivory films representing those worlds, like Brideshead and, well, there was a series, and like Morris. Um, I wonder if you reference those things also.
All of the above. And
Yeah.
then also older films too. I mean, because, starting from Metropolis, through Stanley Kubrick's mind, and the genius there. I mean, you say Brideshead, I mean, that is, probably, I've seen that millions of times, because it just you never can get enough of beauty. And it's not just the beauty in the movie, but I just, the beauty in that in Sebastian and the character as well. The
Mm.
the fragility, and just that it's just so beautiful.
So a question that I wanted to ask you also was, if you can look back at when you first started your brand, um, is there any like advice now that you've on the flip side of when you started? Is What advice would you have for yourself when you first started out? So say my position now.
I think we do have the luxury of being able to do, I think, a really special thing. Just enjoy it. And also, too, don't worry about the business right now. Just create beautiful, interesting things. That's what the world wants right now. The world is so, I think they're so tired of commerciality. I think they're just so hungry for crazy, interesting, beautiful things. And that's our responsibility.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Tom. I really, really enjoyed chatting with you.
From what I've seen, I think you really have a huge career, ahead of you. And just be ready, because the work is hard. And a lot of talented people that don't get the opportunity. And I think I think just keep doing what you're doing. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of work.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. Um, I can just quickly remember that in my second year of uni, we had a project. We had to pick our favorite designer, and design a small project for. And I chose you. So this is a very full circle moment for me, just as we close up. So thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you. So nice to meet you
It's really
too.
lovely.